press play. He's the voice of the intersection of marketing, tech, and popular culture. Thinking is his commodity. DJ, data punk, stylish sock collector, and author of the book Disruptive Marketing. Jeffrey Colon is your host of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds.
Friday, it's another episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. I'm your host, Jeffrey Colon, broadcasting from the campus of Lehigh University this week in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, my alma mater. Back for the Data X Symposium, which took place in Williams Hall, for those who've ever been on campus, or if you happen to be a current student or an alumnus and listening to this podcast for the first time. Great show, or a great session, I should say, talking about how data is used in a variety of different fields, from engineering and computer science to software development to publishing, politics, and marketing. Really good time. I enjoyed myself. Got to speak quite a bit about the nature of data and how it has really reshaped communications. We no longer really communicate in a fluid manner like we did in the past. So what I mean by that is things are much more calculated when it comes to marketing, based on the fact that we have data, plentiful data, to let us know if people are picking up our messages, if our narratives are landing, if our authenticity is shining through. So it makes for a pretty interesting relationship, I think, now between brands and customers. Also makes for interesting relationships between authors and their readers, politicians and their constituents, and of course, athletes and their fans. So I wanted to start off this week's show with a quote from the imaginative, innovative, and inspired book that I like to read every once in a while. I used to close shows with a quote, but sort of got the hankering for opening this particular show with a quote, especially being back on a college campus, and I haven't been back on a college campus for a period of time. I was actually on the University of Washington's campus not too long ago, and it felt very inspiring to be around buildings where people are researching or studying or trying to enlighten their minds, so to speak. So this one comes from Eileen Gray, and hopefully it resonates well with you. To create, one must question everything. And that is the theme of this week's show. We're going to talk a little bit about the future of work and the fact that technology may soon erase lots of jobs, and asking if that actually is a good thing, and what that future may look like. So, for those who don't know, I do have a book coming out, and I haven't been too immersive with the fact that I have a book coming out. I think I could be more immersive if I was working on my third or fourth book. But this is my first book, so I've been a little bit more on the amplification side, letting people know the title and when it's coming out, and that it's available for pre-order. So the title, Disruptive Marketing, what data punks... Oh, what am I saying? Let's start that again. Disruptive Marketing, subtitle, what growth hackers, data punks, and other hybrid thinkers can teach us about navigating the new normal. It's out August 15th on hardcover, July 15th on Kindle. Don't forget, you don't need a Kindle to read a book that comes via Kindle. You can download the Kindle app on your iPad or Surface if you wanted to read it that way. It's also going to be on audiobook, and I'm going to be voicing that, so I'm pretty excited about that. But in the book, I talk a lot about the future of marketing and how that's going to look a little different in a society based on the fact that revenue may not be a very important predictive measurement tool. And I don't go too deep into it, and I won't ruin it for you here because obviously I want you to read the book. But I note the fact that the reason revenue isn't really a good indicator is because it's very possible in the long-term future that revenue isn't even in our language anymore. So it's interesting to read about a movement of futurists. They call themselves post-workists. Sounds a little strange. But what they actually are looking for, yearning for, is the fact that the world, they're looking for a future where there is no work anymore. I can't remember his name. It'll come to me. But famous song called IGY, Intergalactic Year, which took place in 1968, about the fact that we would live in this future that you'd be able to travel from New York to Paris in 90 minutes underwater, of course. And there'd be more leisure time for artists everywhere because you wouldn't have to work. But in some respects, I think the interesting thing about asking the what-if question, and that's obviously what we ask a lot of on this show and a variety of different topics that might interest creatives and marketers and management alike, is what does that world look like? And I think it's going to be really interesting because before we had industrialization, before that swept through our worldwide economy, and that was for much of the late 19th century and all of the 20th century, of course, into the beginnings of the 21st century, we had an economy where many who didn't work on farms were artisans. And most of them were pretty much, they had to find new ways to survive or ways to live based on the fact that you had mass production in the 20th century, industrialization. But it's interesting because I think moving forward, there are many who see the next wave of automation returning us to an age of craftsmanship and artistry. Or I should say creativity. How do you actually do things that instead of mass production, you may only produce, let's say, 10 at a time? And they're very valuable based on the fact that there is scarcity with what you're producing. And a lot of this is, of course, based on the ramifications of 3D printing, where machines construct complex objects from digital designs. So it's interesting because we have to ask ourselves, what if the new tech, like 3D printing machines, can do customized things that are almost as cheap as mass production now? So is it possible that information technology and robots, even though they may eliminate traditional jobs, including those that marketers may have done for a period of time, I think specifically on how the analytical side of the spectrum, I don't think the creative side would be eliminated because you would still need people who can actually respond to human emotions, and AI is a far, far, far away from that at the moment. But is it possible that because of this sort of wave toward robots and IT eliminating traditional jobs, that it makes it possible for a new artisanal or creative economy, an economy geared around self-expression, where people would do artistic things in their leisure time? So in other words, it would be a future not of consumption, but of creativity. as technology returns the tools of the assembly line to individuals, democratizing the means of mass production. So this is interesting because I think, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, well, how are we going to eat? How do I make revenue? And how do I actually eat? And I think those are things that no one can answer just yet. I think as software continues to eat the world, and we know that it is, we have to start asking ourselves, what do we do with more automation? And we've talked a lot about automation on this show. I asked the question a couple of episodes ago, does automation make us more or less creative? And I actually said it makes us more creative. And the reason being is because it frees you up to actually be creative from a point of view where you can use your mind to express yourself in ways that you can't necessarily do when you're bogged down with a number of things like, okay, hey, we created something, now we have to figure out how we're going to actually distribute that and reach a target audience, etc. Automation would handle those things for you so you could actually concentrate on the creative aspects. So I don't ask myself the deeper questions on, what do we actually do to eat? I think that's too difficult to actually figure out at the moment. But as computers take over more tasks previously considered the province of humans, the pendulum will swing back from bits to atoms, at least when it comes to how people spend their days. So a digitally preoccupied society is going to come to appreciate the pure and distinct pleasure of making things you can touch again. And we call this the post-digital era. I actually mentioned this in my book as well. We are looking really forward to ushering in a new era of technology where robots may do most of our bidding. And if you have better robotics, then you don't really have to worry about things that we do. You could actually maybe concentrate on playing or drawing or actually talking to each other again. If you think about how communication works now, we don't talk to each other as much because we use simulated and electronic means to do much of that work. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually comes full circle once again. So it's interesting, I think, the fact that we are moving more toward a creative economy should be of major interest, I think, to marketers. We have been bogged down for a very long period of time. In the past, I would say 10 years, maybe a little more, of really looking at the analytical side of the spectrum. How many click-throughs have we had? How many visitors have we gotten to our site? How many pieces of content have been shared? We haven't really looked and said to ourselves, but hold on a second, has that resonated with the individuals who have engaged with whatever it is that we've created? Of course, we don't have the answer to a lot of those questions because we don't know each individual that might come to an owned page that we're controlling, so to speak, on the web. But those are things that we may have a better indicators of, and there might actually be a way for us to get more than just engagement, but how do you involve those people in actually producing the actual creative work in an integrated fashion? The internet and the cheap availability of artistic tools has already empowered millions of people to produce culture from their living rooms. I came up with a term, I use it in the book, I've used it in a couple blog posts. It's called producerism. It's actually a riff on an old political term. If you think about it, producers have more power and sway than those who are just the money to fund such movements. What I mean by that is those who actually produce have a greater standing in society than those who just have the means to fund the production. And when you get into a world where anybody can produce, then it actually moves more toward a meritocratic society, because you are judging people based on the output of what they can produce. How creative is it? Rather than, hey, I have the most money and I have the means to actually control the software that's being created. Right now, that is the case. The means of which people can create software is more limited because you have to have developers who can develop it, etc. But once that becomes a little bit more democratized, once you enter machine learning into the equation and anything can happen, things could get quite unique. Because it doesn't necessarily mean that one has to have coding skills per se, but really imaginary and creative ideas. People now, in 2016, they upload more than 400,000 hours of YouTube videos and 350 million new Facebook photos every day. The demise of the formal economy, the one that we still live in, could free many would-be artists, writers, and craftspeople to dedicate their time to creative interests, to live as cultural producers. Such activities offer virtues that many organizational psychologists consider central to satisfaction at work: independence, the chance to develop mastery, and a sense of purpose. So it's going to be very interesting now as we sort of move toward a world where the creative economy is the main thruster or the main booster in our sort of mainstream life, and we stop asking the question, "Hey, why are you being creative? That doesn't make any money." And actually say, you know what, that actually provides value in a society. By making people happy, by making people think, by making people question. We don't get enough of that in a world where much media has been sort of owned by a small amount of users. Again, as we democratize that, and everyone has the ability to be a creator or a producer or a remixer or a writer or an artist, then it gets quite interesting to see what people's point of view is on the complexities of the world. So marketing, in a lot of respects, actually becomes less about how am I going to amplify something and more about how am I going to aggregate the zeitgeist of feelings around me at a given moment. So I want you to think a little bit more about that if you're a marketer listening to the show, if you're in management listening to the show, if you're a person that just loves where marketing is going. It's really becoming less about how do I talk about myself and talk about a brand and talk about products and talk about utilitarian value and talk about features. And it's really more about, hey, what are you sensing? And how can we get you to pick up the tools of production and create a feeling or an aura around what we're trying to inspire people to think about? This is one of the reasons why I think if you are marketing consumer packaged goods, you're probably a distant, you're distant behind many people who are marketing tech or cognitive capital products. And the reason being is because fast-moving consumer goods, that category has always been about how do you sell as many as possible to scale to make a specific amount of revenue. Whereas in technological products, you're really looking to get people to adopt, and you may only need a few to adopt in order to make any revenue, so to speak. But it's also not about the revenue per se. It's about the adoption rate. Have those people actually adopted using those features? Is it going to change their behavior moving forward? So it's fascinating that the conversation about work isn't really about work as much as it is about, well, what's our place in the world? What should we be doing? How creative should we be? And will it get us actually asking more and more questions about the creative output that we should be putting forward rather than following a template of rules? So for those who may have read my LinkedIn piece that I posted in conjunction with this podcast, the interesting thing that I'm actually talking a lot about is there are too many people who want to follow the template of rules when it comes to marketing, because it's easy to do that. It's very simple to follow best practices. Of course, everyone loves to follow best practices. It allows you to scale. But we need more original creators in marketing. That's what we're missing. And what I mean by that is people who actually are coming up with new forms of software that allow others to create with that software. Now, granted, I'm going to give a little bit of a plug here, and why not? Because I've been using the software probably since I was in college. But Adobe has always made really creative software, and rightfully so. But we're in a world now where we need more creative tools, more ways to show expression or self-expression, or allow others to show expression. So it's interesting to see how all of this is going to play out over the next couple of years. And if we're going to actually have more marketers who say, I'm not going to play in the sandbox. Yes, it's wonderful that Snapchat has filters, but I'm going to actually hack and do something a little different and create my own filters rather than the ones that they provide, and see if they actually adopt that. See, we're still living, unfortunately, in a society that thinks it's a read-only society. And we're waiting for everyone who works at these big tech companies to come up with the solutions for us, rather than hacking through some of those solutions and coming up with something unique and innovative that either that organization adopts, those platforms adopt, or that becomes a whole new piece of creative software or platform unto itself. We need more original creators. We are totally lacking that in marketing. We have too many people that obviously are just following the rules. And we know what happens when you follow the rules. You only get as far as the crowd when you try to follow them. So hopefully we move more into a world where we have less practitioners, those who are just going through the motions. And of course, why are they going through those motions? Because they need a job, they need salary, they need revenue. And really more to this post-workist viewpoint, where people are truly expressing themselves and their creativity because that is an extension of their soul. That's what they have to offer society. And they're not so worried about all of the other things in terms of making ends meet. So hopefully this topic didn't blow your mind. Again, like I said, when you're on a college campus, you gotta talk about things that might be way, way out there and a little bit left of center. But I think lately being, a creative analytical hybrid like myself, it can be tough in a world filled with either all mathematics or all creatives. And of course, we have to ask a lot of the questions on, how do we become more creative? Not how do we become more efficient? That's usually what most people are going to try to press you to be in marketing, is how do you become more efficient? And ultimately, you want to sort of rebel against that and say, hey, how do we become more creative? Because that's ultimately, I should say, the world we are moving toward. One that is really more creative in its output, less process-oriented, less dealing with mass production at scale, and really a world that's moving more back towards sort of an artisanal world where what comes out of my mind, what comes out of your mind, is really what will signify the true currency of the future. But that's going to take a lot more original creators and creations to usher that world into reality. I'm your host, Jeffrey Colon. Make sure you tune in to us, or I should say tune in to me every Friday. We release a new episode, and we post on a variety of different platforms, so you can download or subscribe to us wherever it's convenient for you. So make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. You can look us up, Disruptive FM. Spreaker, which is the wonderful podcast platform, and we, of course, use their recording software for all the shows. You can find us on SoundCloud as well, if you're more of a SoundCloud fan. And then we also post all the shows on my YouTube channel. So if you enjoy listening to audio on a video network, you have the right to do that as well. Make sure you tweet to us at DisruptiveFM, or use the hashtag DisruptiveFM to communicate with us. And we look forward to a new show next Friday. Same bat station, same podcast time. I'm your host, Jeffrey Colon. Namaste.
You've been listening to an episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes. Purchase a copy of Jeffrey's latest book, Disruptive Marketing, on Kindle, hardcover and audio. Signing off from the city of Seattle. Press pause.
If you're a listener of the show, but you're looking to interact with me in person, make sure you check out my speaking calendar on my website, jeffreycolon.net/speaking. That's GEOFFREYCOLON.net/speaking.